The show doesn't know what it wants. Its premise is a scenario done a million times over. The main character, that's apparently talentless, manages through hard work and effort to overcome the odds and become the strongest. Also, it takes place at a school because why wouldn't it? Anyway, the point is that this formula is tried and true, and extremely hard to mess up. However, Wistoria makes the interesting decision to start at Will's final year of school. This contradicts the fundamental appeal of this kind of show. First and foremost, Will is competent. Really competent. For episode 1, he's already cleared the entire dungeon available to him and is comfortably one-shotting every monster in his way. So now we've cut out all the enjoyment of watching him progressively grow stronger or make his way through the dungeon from the start, and all the bullying that he faces falls short because it's made immediately clear that he's the best in the academy, even compared to the teachers. Second, by starting at the end of his time at school, you remove all the benefits that come with a school setting, namely the natural world building and introduction to the magic and caste systems, which are both the main focus of the story. Will is also an honors student. He's amassed every single non-magic related credit that the school has to offer, and so when the plot remembers that it's taking place in his school in order to explain things which should be the basic of the basics, which is what every single classroom scene amounts to, it suddenly doesn't make any sense because he and everyone else in that year should already be completely familiar with these things. There's no real plot to this show, at all. Now, this isn't actually entirely an issue. A lot of shows like this make use of their setting to have their characters partake in lessons or extracurriculars, but this show kinda just does things. One episode Will's in a dungeon, the next is a tournament, then suddenly it's the final practical exam. These are the three major story beats, if you could even call them that, and they aren't even strung together naturally. Instead, the episode structure goes as follows. Will is being bullied or has some kind of flashback about being bullied for not having magical powers, then some kind of combat situation arises, and Will effortlessly wins. There's nothing of substance here, and it gets tiring quick. The school setting is typically also used to develop a wide cast of interesting or fun characters in a natural way. Once again, this isn't possible because Will is already in his final year. The cast of characters is actually quite small, most only appearing in the second half, and their screen time is insignificant. Additionally, they aren't interesting in the least. Pretty much every single character in this show hates Will, and that's their only character trait. Sion is violent and angry and often abuses Will of his magic powers. His sole development is that he actually has an inferiority complex and wants Will to recognize him. Julius is apparently a genius. He has a massive ego and hates Will because he can't use magic. Bruno is an elf. He has a massive ego and hates Will because he can't use magic. Colette is Will's only friend, but she's only reduced to a minor love interest and has no standout qualities of her own. All these characters are apparently in the top 5 students of the academy, and yet they manage to do so little and are so quickly reduced to such basic elements that they might as well not exist at all. Will himself isn't interesting either. He's your resident nice guy twin character and has no defining characteristics. Being a childhood friend of the most talented human mage of all time could lead to some interesting backstory, but what we really get is repetitive flashbacks which amount to exactly what he's going through in the present day, but in Dre's tale. Will doesn't experience any development, both from the start of the show and from his past. By the credits of episode 12, he's exactly the same character. The only difference is that we now know he's even more competent than initially thought, without showing any of that effort on screen. Again, this contradicts the major appeal of these kinds of shows. When you make a story in which the entire premise is someone with no talent beating the odds and proving everyone wrong through hard work, and then have your character constantly go on about how his experiences shape who he is today, without showing any of that, it robs the viewer of all that satisfaction. The visuals are this show's saving grace. They make extremely good use of 3D space and are constantly utilizing unique angles and fluid camera movement throughout action sequences. However, even this becomes tiring after a while. Outside of the action, this sometimes ends up looking awkward, and even in action they fall into the trap of seeing how many flashing colors they can put on screen at once. Despite the combat being fairly backloaded, the beginning episodes were far more visually impressive, but maybe that's just a consequence of me becoming tired of the show. I think Wistoria just didn't come into fruition with a solid game plan. Is this going to be another Zero to Hero type story, maybe a fantasy magic store experience, a revenge story where those with less magical aptitude rise up against the more privileged classes? All these elements are introduced and repeatedly brought up throughout the course of its runtime, yet none are expanded upon properly, leaving me extremely unsatisfied and frankly annoyed. There's no interesting or fun characters, the world isn't properly developed, the magic system is generic and uninspired, everything seen for the animation quality is subpar. Very disappointing.